You're listening to the Modern People Leader podcast, where we go behind the scenes with today's top HR leaders and work experts. We talk to them about how they've gotten to where they're at, what they do every day, and what they see coming next for the future of work. Hope you enjoy. All right, here we go. Another episode of MPL. How you doing, Abby?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm riding high. I don't want to steal my thunder with good news stories, but yeah, it's been a great week for MPL. How about for you?
Love it. Yeah, solid week for sure.
Should we do good news stories?
Yeah, let's go. Let's jump in.
Let's
too much
do it.
Good to share.
Yeah. And Abby, are you familiar with good news stories?
I am. I love them.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
In that case, you go first. You lead us off, and we'll go next.
Okay. My good news story, I'm going to go with a personal one. And that is that I have taken up more seriously running in the last year or so. And I am doing like official training right now for a half marathon that's happening in a month. And my training block's going really well and I'm hitting my numbers. And like, that's really like showing itself this week. Like I had a hard run today and showed up, and it's been a tough training season because it's been so cold in New York this winter, like so cold. So it's finally like short season, and it's just the kind of thing like I'm following a plan and it's actually working, and that's very satisfying.
Is it like half of your runs are like zone 2, and then you have like a couple like zone 3? Like I'm curious, what's the plan?
Yeah, so the plan is I have a number of runs during the course of the week, and each one is focused on something different. So there might be a speed interval, might do a tempo run, might do a hill workout, a long run. So it's kind of a variety pack. Only 2 of my runs each week are like easy runs. Those would be like zone 2 runs.
That's what I'm supposed to be doing.
Is that a thing? An easy run? Like to me,
Steven,
that's not a thing.
Well, maybe I'll blow your mind. It's also called conversational pace.
Yeah, Steven, you should try a zone 2 run. It's honestly hard to run slow enough to where your heart rate is in zone 2. So I've been doing some of this training too, not for a half marathon, but for something similar. And yeah, like if you're running zone 2, that's like running at like an 11-minute pace or like 10.5-minute pace.
Oh, that's my
style.
So
it feels like,
okay.
It feels like you're like speed walking almost, like slightly faster than that.
Okay. I can get down with that.
I call it podcast pace.
Nice.
Just cruising along.
Got my podcast pace run this morning.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I'll go next because Daniel, I know you have a lot of good news to share today. My good news is work related and events. I love events. I absolutely love it. I'm an extrovert. I just get fired up. I'm a bit of a ham, so I like public speaking, but the administration of an event and the planning and execution is really stressful. And this is coming from someone who's okay, just kind of going with the flow. We finally have locked down. We've gone and I guess the big thing here is that like one day it feels like you're so far behind and nothing is in place. And then like literally 24 hours later, it's like, we're riding high. And so my good news is we're riding high. MPL Live San Francisco is our next event. And we're super excited. We just locked down our venue, which is Envoy, the kind of company registration, registration app, where they're going to be gracious. They've graciously agreed to be our host, our venue for the event. Their space is sick. It is beautiful, modern, just like totally on brand. We are about sold out on sponsorships. And so we're surging on panelists right now, and the names are insane. I can't jinx it yet because we don't have formal confirmations yet, but we should in the next week. And so again, it's like we went from zero to hero is how I described it in stand-up this morning. So super excited about that.
That's awesome.
I'll build off of that, no pun intended, but or actually pun intended. Sorry, that the dad joke's already coming out. We also went from zero to hero with MPL Build in the last week, or really like in the last like 4 or 5 days. I very arrogantly
I was going to say 48 hours. But we'll take 4 or 5 days.
I thought that like you could just create like a Substack newsletter and have it look pretty within like an hour, and that we could just like spin this up that we just needed to have the content in place. And as like the marketer on the team, it took it took much longer than I anticipated, but we're live. As of this morning, Wednesday, April 16th, MPL Build is out there for the world to see, and it's exciting. Like, I haven't felt like this giddy about something since when we launched Modern People Leader almost 5 years ago. Like, I remember those early days, like sitting on the couch on weekends and at night, just like getting it out there because I was so excited to put it out there. And I feel very similarly about MPL Build. So that's my good news. I'm pumped about that.
Congrats. It's huge.
Thank you.
And it's beautiful.
Oh,
I'm glad to
good.
hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out to Greenline Creative. Am I getting their name right? Yeah, I always get they're great. They're our design partners for the website and for a lot of the a brand refresh, I guess is what you would call it. Great work. But enough about us. This isn't about us. You know, Abby, today we're talking about you, and I call this the Brene Brown question. As you know, if you're a multi-time listener, it's my favorite question, and that's like, what's your story? Give us the full journey, and what your career has looked like in HR, all the meanders and ups and downs. Like, we want to hear about you.
So we keep coming back to the Annie Dean episode, and that's for a reason. Atlassian has mastered the art of running a distributed team, and Annie shared something that really stuck from their internal data. Daily office visits don't drive team connection, but 3 to 5 days of intentional togetherness, that does. They found that bringing teams together a few times a year led to a 37% increase in team connection, and that boost lasted about 4 or 5 months. So just let that sink in. It's not constant office time. It's not more Zooms. It's just one well-planned offsite every few months. That in-person time really matters. Not daily, but deliberate. Retreats, offsites, onsites, sales kickoffs. These are the moments that fuel culture, creativity, and collaboration. The problem that we see? Corporate group travel is extremely painful to plan, and it's one of the biggest line items on your budget. And so that's where Marco comes in. They make corporate group stay as easy as booking a personal hotel room. Think Airbnb, but for groups of up to 500 people. One, they're going to negotiate on your behalf, so you'll get 20 to 30% cheaper prices on hotels. Two, the properties are handpicked for corporate group travel, so you're going to have the right mix of meeting spaces, communal areas, on-site dining options, and other group-focused amenities. Lastly, their AI-powered search makes it really easy for you to find that perfect hotel based on group size, city, vibe, whatever it is that you're looking for. And honestly, when Suman, Marco's co-founder, walked us through how it works, we were blown away by how simple it is to book group travel with them. Something that's been historically very manual and kind of complex. So if you're planning your next team offsite, leadership retreat, or full company gathering, I highly recommend you go check out Marco. There are no contracts, no signups, and it's 100% free. Go check them out at mpl.marcoexperiences.com. That's mpl.marcoexperiences.com.
Great. I would say my journey is not one that I made sense of in the moment, but looking back, I think, you can tie things together a little bit more neatly. I would say it's more of like a jungle gym than a ladder of sorts, and started really actually as a CPA. I studied accounting in undergrad and got my master's in accounting. And the reason for that was that I did a couple internships in marketing at Target. I'm from Minnesota, so that was natural to work at Target at some point, being headquartered there. And the people I was working with told me, when you're in school, study something that you cannot learn outside of the school environment. And accounting definitely was that. You can't just pick up accounting. So I studied accounting, practiced accounting. I worked at PwC as a tax accountant and consultant for 6 years. I served clients in the asset management, private equity space, worked a ton, saw the team grow immensely in New York, really smart people, learned a lot, worked really hard. And after 6 years in being a manager, I realized what I really liked about my work and the world I was in was more of the people management and more of like project management. I also liked making elegant of messy. I liked the numbers. I wasn't scared of the numbers by any means. One of the things I did not like was the internal revenue code. And you gotta love the internal revenue code if you're really gonna make it in tax. So PwC being a really big company, I wanted to stay there. It was definitely a great environment for learning and growing and just good people. So I looked at other opportunities across the organization and was lucky to get selected for what they had called a tour of duty, which is basically a rotational program, which is incredible. The name of the tour that I went on was called Mind of the Billionaire. And it was working with 2 members of the executive team, senior leaders, on a book about self-made billionaires. So my role was leading a small team, basically as a project manager, overseeing the research, the writing, the interviews, all that went into a book. And I actually brought a prop, why not? So helped oversee the execution of this book, which was awesome. It took about, 18 months or so to have it all come together and get the right resources. And books are hard. Actually getting it published and that timeline too is crazy. Through that experience kind of opened my eyes to everything that PwC did from a strategic perspective. And I also learned a lot about the most successful people that kind of exist on the planet, at least by a financial measure, during that time too. So opened my eyes up to kind of the sense of risk taking and also the kinds of problems that I wanted to solve and how I pushed myself. Got some really, really valuable advice during that time, actually from the chief of staff to the chairman. And she shared with me, you keep doing good work, solving problems, and opportunities will unlock and reveal themselves. So I kept doing good work, kept solving problems, and sure enough, I was able to stay working with the leader I was working for at the time and pivot into corporate social responsibility. So working on PwC's business as a force for good. So my role on the team there was elevating the brand and reputation of PwC by telling the story of the work we were doing in the community and also through the work of our client services. So I get to work some really cool projects, including like a mini documentary series, again, sharing the impact of the work we were doing, learned a lot again about the organization, the value in social impact, what it meant from a strategic lens. This was also at a time where the B Corp movement was really emerging, the sense of purpose and what's a business's purpose actually in the world. And PwC was also looking at what is our future going to look like here as the world is changing. So they went about creating their own global purpose statement, their why as an organization, really putting a stake in the ground around why they existed. And they evolved my leader's role, the corporate social responsibility leader, into the chief purpose officer. So we created a role that ended up being the right hand to her as leading the strategy and the activation around the firm's purpose. And that also included the values, like what are the behaviors that we need showing up across the organization? How are we helping our folks actually find more work and meaning in the work that they're doing? That was a huge and very popular conversation, which I think has even gotten more so today of, work isn't just work. It actually means something much deeper to people. So all of this was being done over the course of several years and got to, again, work on incredible projects, setting up programs, experiences for our employees, working on thought leadership as well. So actually researching the space and creating a point of view on it. And all of that came to fruition when we were able to actually embed what we were doing internally into our external client service offering. So I was able to kind of come full circle, if you will, with straddling an external internal role. And really cool too, to actually be able to have something internal that then you get to build and deliver externally with clients alongside client service teams. So after I hit the 13-year mark at PwC, it flew by. And I just could not believe 13 years had passed. My mom had an accident. She had a spinal cord injury. And between the 13-year anniversary and my mom's accident, it was just like this wake-up call of inertia will make decisions for you if you don't. And it was also at that time, you're in this purpose and values space and you're doing your own deep kind of reflection of what my purpose is and what my work is all about and what I want to be doing. So I just decided the best thing for me was to take a beat and leave to have some space to figure it out, what was next. And it wasn't, again, because I didn't like my work and what I was doing. I just needed to know like what I was doing was right for me at the time. So that was in 2019, and the time off was great, really honestly energizing to be able to reset and look at what I wanted to do next, and realizing so much of the work that I was doing and finding impact around was working with people in the people space. I was not actually on a people team, but I was working alongside our HR team, the L&D team, the coaching center of excellence. So I started looking for roles where I could actually be embedded in a people team. So I will fast forward through the very tough times of early COVID days, where I was being able to actually work with some startups and getting exposure to the tech universe. And that did help me understand I wanted something really fast paced. I wanted something where I could actually wrap my arms around the work and the employee base to make an impact quickly. So I was looking at, pretty well-funded startups at that point. I didn't want to be somewhere super, super scrappy, but still wanted something that I could start to build a foundation around. I had been reading about an organization called Carta, being Bay Area based, but having operations in New York, growing really quickly with a mission that was really inspiring to me around creating more owners and equity for all. So I reached out and was able to have some incredible conversations with their people team, and the stars aligned for a role that opened up, and my background being a really great fit. So I started with Carta late 2020 as a strategy and planning manager, I think was my title, with the people team. And I remember starting, and the chief people officer told me, this is an MVP people team, just so you know, like we're doing a lot of 0 to 1, just figuring stuff out. I welcomed. And it was really exciting when I got there, moving really fast. First projects I was taking on were introducing and rolling out a leveling framework for the organization and defining the people team flywheel and what are we actually going to do to create that momentum internally to really get it spinning, figuring out what road mapping and prioritization looks like for the team. So fast forward, hypergrowth in 2021, the market went crazy in terms of hiring. Over the course of 2 years, Carta went from about 800 people to over 2,000. And also in that time, we had multiple acquisitions, we had global expansion, we had RTO V1, V2, V3, V10, starting and stopping. We had leadership changes, we had a rebrand, we had it all packed in. Like it was an incredible, truly everything. Front row seat. My role changed as things do when you're in that quickly fast-paced environment. I think my manager actually, she left onto another role within 2 months of me starting. So like immediately my role was evolving. So over that time, I took on more responsibility, got a lot more exposure. It was awesome, learning super fast, moving really fast, and the organization was thriving. And then the market started contracting. So we faced a RIF, and a pretty large RIF, and went through a lot of other reorgs. And my role continued to evolve and change. And in that time, at the time, I guess around the 3-year mark or so, I was leading 6 functions: people operations, people systems, internal comms, people analytics, project management, and then the executive assistants. So it sounds like this, like it's a lot. It sounds like a total hodgepodge, right? Like that is a lot of different teams. And some of them are teams of one, just to be clear. But I loved it. It was magical. We could all come together to solve problems. Like those team members, if we had something that really, really hairy to figure out, those are the folks you wanted in the room to sort it out and sort it out fast. So what I loved about the ability and chance to work with that kind of variety pack of folks was exactly that, like bringing them together to solve problems and really make magic happen. Our team really became that connective tissue, not just across the people org, but also G&A and the broader organization too. It's not uncommon for somebody that very disconnected from the team would approach us and say, I got a problem. Can you help me out? Like, I just don't know where to go or where to start. So I love the team. My favorite time with the team was on Fridays. We had Friday jam sesh with me, and it was my direct reports. And it was just our time to decompress together, but also throw out some crazy ideas, problems we're seeing, different pitches around what it might look like to solve them. We did an employee journey map out of that, actually, that became a much larger project. I know you all had yours on the pod.
Yeah.
And we used Pin too. So it was awesome timing because we were doing that at the same time that they were rolling out that feature within their platform. But just really a cool chance to get to try and test things with a really eclectic group of folks. So time at Carta ended late last year, and it was a bit tough because going from being inside the people team, which was awesome. I love the chance to actually be able to work alongside other change makers, and also having my background, getting really familiar with the business and be able to drive business change. I was also on some of the lesser attractive parts of the people stuff, if you will, and that included riffs. And my way out of Carta was being on the other side of that. So I went from, operationalizing and executing riffs on the people team to actually being impacted. And it was quite a different experience being on the other side of the script, the other side of all the departure materials, oh, this is what it's like to actually go through the documents and everything. So I am grateful for having, I guess, had that experience. I definitely have a much deeper sense of empathy now. I had not gone through a layoff before on this side. And I've got a different perspective on things for sure since then. So it was, yeah.
Wow. I mean, for everybody listening, we met Abby at a dinner in, it must have been late January. Is that right?
Something around there, yeah.
And occasionally we'll meet somebody at a dinner and have a feeling that somebody is really interesting and we should bring them onto the show. And that was the case for us when we met Abby. And so that's how she ended up here with us today. But we had not heard the full story. And what a freaking story. One of your first tasks at PwC was doing a tour of duty and writing a book on Mind of the Billionaire. You've done so many interesting things. And so yeah, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, what a badass story. And
thank
so
you.
what are you up to now? What's next? What are you looking for? Where's your head at?
Yeah, I think one of the things I've had a lot of time to reflect, which is great, and not always able to reflect when you're in the thick of it, right? So grateful for some space right now. Job market's tough right now. I'll be perfectly honest, especially I think for more senior roles. I am still wanting to work either inside or right alongside a people team. I still really believe in the power of people and culture to drive positive business change. And I think some of the things I'm realizing this time looking for a job versus in 2019, 2020, things have changed in the market. And and also my perspective, just in terms of the candidate experience, I have such a different perspective on this time, having been on embedded in it before. Whereas before, like I said, I was on the outside edges of the people org, not inside. So I have a different perspective from that lens. I also am looking for different things from an organization. And given the current context and environment we're in right now, things are much louder than they used to be in the best possible way from a candidate perspective. So if I read, oh, you got rid of your ERGs, thank you for sharing that. That is shifting my decision parameters right now. Oh, one other thing that did not exist last time I was looking for a job is pay transparency. My goodness. I remember when all of that was rolling out, we're what will this do? Not sure about it. Is it going to upset people? And now I see the total value on the candidate side, being able to understand and appreciate, because titles really don't mean anything nowadays, to be able to kind of gut check what that is.
I got laid off in November 2022. And I just remember having so many mixed emotions. I was sad, I was embarrassed, but I was also relieved. One moment asking my wife if I should quit my job and try to make MPL work, and the next day that decision's being made for me. And I'm lucky. Most people don't have a passion project to fall back on like the MPL. And it's terrifying and confusing trying to navigate your next steps after something like a layoff. And honestly, the outplacement services that were offered to me at the time felt pretty underwhelming. they didn't seem like they'd actually help. And I just remember feeling frustrated and a little bit bummed. I thought about asking for more support, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I realized that the leaders managing the process were just as overwhelmed and frustrated as I was. They were being asked to do more with less. They were handling these layoffs with little support or guidance, all while trying to protect the company's culture and take care of their people. And so that's why Career Sandwich's mission really hit home for me when I met them. It's not just another outplacement service, it's holistic transition support that helps both individuals and the people leaders who support them, giving everyone a little bit of peace of mind during a really crazy time like a layoff. And they do more than just help your alumni brush up on their resume. They help them tell their story, from figuring out who they are to defining where they want to go next. Career Sandwich helps them craft a narrative that really makes sense of the journey, and their platform is pretty sick. There's one-on-one coaching, there's group workshops, there's on-demand resources that are designed to help alumni really articulate their value, the story, and feel a little bit more confident about their next steps in a time that feels very uncertain. And so if you're an HR leader that's having to part ways with people from your team and need support, making this process as least crappy as it can possibly be, then I highly recommend checking out Career Sandwich. If you want to get in contact with their team, go to careersandwich.com/MPL. That's careersandwich.com/MPL.
Yeah, I +1 on pay transparency. I've spent a lot of time the last year in the comp space, and we've had a client that is focused on compensation and headcount management, and I don't think I fully understood. I understood the buzzword of pay transparency, but I don't think I fully appreciated the concept. And we just had a webinar last week. Well, we call them MPL Live Virtual Session with Matt McFarlane and Harris Ikram, the CEO of Kinder IQ. And man, it just opened up my mind to like what we're really talking about and some of the things. I thought, one version of pay transparency is the ability is on the employee experience side. So as a candidate experience, employee experience, like being able to see like how my compensation, what my compensation is before I actually apply for the job. That's kind of the most kind of robust version in my head. But it also includes things like just within the organization, managers having access to how their teams are being paid, managers being able to see at the offer stage how the proposed salary, how that falls into pay ranges and how that relates to the broader team. And I just was blown away at like the depth of the topic because, I think we try to avoid buzzwords, and I feel like pay transparency was a buzzword for a long time. We did talk about it, but yeah, it's just like the more and more time I spend in that space, the more I learn, it feels like. And so I want to dig into our topic today. And as Daniel mentioned, we were sitting at dinner and we were chatting, and I think we try to shake up the tables so that like there is a chance to meet as many people as you can at the dinners that we help with. And I think I sat like right in front of you for the first portion of the dinner, and you were just sharing your thoughts, and you brought up the topic of ONA. And I think we were like 5 minutes into our conversation. I leaned over to Daniel and I was like, we need to have Abby on the podcast. Like, I know we have a very focused content strategy for 2025, but we got to find a way to bring Abby onto the show. And it's because I am a big fan of ONA, but I feel like kind of like pay transparency a couple of years ago, it's just something that wasn't talked a lot about, or it wasn't fully understood. And so we have talked about it on the show. It's been a while. And based on our conversation, like that's where I want to start. our chat today. And so first of all, ONA, I believe, stands for Organizational Network Analysis. Is that right? Okay. And so I know there are various takes and kind of angles on ONA. And so I want to start with like what ONA means to you, how you explain it to people that are maybe new to the conversation, and then we can go from there.
Great. Yeah. We'll just start up front. It's only been the last few years that I've really gotten more familiar with ONA, and I still have a lot more to learn. It's one of those topics that, like, the more you peel, the more layers you find. And also it's just a fascinating space. I use this term with you all too. I think of ONA as that shadow org chart. That has been used elsewhere too. I'm not coining that term by any means. But it's the way your organization actually gets work done and actually shares information and actually figures out who's motivating who. If I were to explain it to somebody who's not familiar with the concept of networks or what this might look like in the workplace, most people know 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. So I would say 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon for the workplace in terms of revealing hidden influencers, who your informal networks are that are really powering the organization. Because at the end of the day, the org chart tells one story, but ONA tells the real one.
And was this something that you were introduced to through a vendor? Was this something that you had discovered out in the wild, maybe like from a LinkedIn post or an article? How did you even find out about ONA?
Yeah, I can't put my finger on an actual like point in time, first ever time I heard about it. Definitely had read about it, but actually holding on to and seeing a report was at Carta. The founder and CEO, Henry Ward, brought in back in, I think, 2017, he brought in a vendor to do this analysis. At the time, the company was about 250 people. And I remember reading his blog post on it and looking at the report and just thinking, wow, that is fascinating to see the visualization. If you're not familiar with network visualizations, like a network graph is just visually very appealing and intriguing to try to unpack and look at. But the types of insights that could come from that I found really actionable just stuck out and stuck with me for some time. So knowing it was a passion of Henry's, he was bringing it also into not just a one-time event, but we actually used it as part of a complement to and another dimension of our performance management and our performance reviews. So I got really, really deep in it through that experience.
Wow. So Carta has been using some version of ONA since 2017.
Yeah, there was a window of time where I don't believe was actually when I wasn't there. So for sure in 2017, that was the first time there was a report out on it.
That's so interesting.
It's a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So ONA is this shadow org chart. It's your way of visualizing how work gets done, who's motivating who, and as you said, the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, like who's powering the organization. And so, like, when you were looking at this first visual, like, what were some of the things on there that wowed you?
I think immediately I recognized most of the names, but there were other folks that I'm like, aren't they like really junior in the organization? And challenging myself so that's the whole point of an org network analysis, is to find those folks that are not going to surface necessarily by way of level or title or hierarchy. So I think that was really compelling to me, of being able to find the pockets that you're just not going to find through a singular performance rating.
And so I feel like ONA, and I believe it's a concept, because I did know about ONA, and the way that I learned about ONA, it was in the 2008, 2009. I was a vice president at Goldman Sachs, and I was a part of a leadership program that, and this is like in classroom-based learning, and it was essentially an ONA mapping class, and it was like mastering your own ONA to further your career. And it was, think of like a hotspot type of diagram with like spokes coming off of each of the hotspots of names of people that I did work with, names of people that I went to for advice, people that I went to for execution, like various aspects of work. And I remember being blown away about it. I went to the facilitator. I was like, how do I learn more about this? And they were like, well, here's this book. And it was like an IBM book. I probably have it somewhere about ONA. But back in 2009, like Web 2.0 doesn't even exist. Most companies don't even have like a digital record of their employee files yet. And so it wasn't really practical to, I guess, implement ONA, in my opinion. And so I didn't hear about it until it like recently came back up, I would say in the last year. And I feel like the combination of like the improved tech stack, so there are tools out there that can like legit do this, as well as the changing role of an HR leader or an HR executive, which continues to change, and the emergence of Gen AI is elevating ONA. And I hope it has its moment. I guess we'll see. And the reason I say that is, for me, I do feel like a lot of the things that with this new superpower, a lot of the job of HR leaders, a lot of the things that we spend a lot of time on I predict will go away. And there will be like teams of like AI engineer embedded in HR, building these tools that are just like making a lot of the administrative tasks and work that we obsess about. It's just going to be gone, right? And so what I spent a lot of time asking myself is like, okay, well, if and when that is gone, well, what do we do then? Like what, then what? And I believe there is, again, this is Wertonomics, so this isn't rooted in any kind of data, but I believe the tasks that an HR leader is going to be responsible for are the really kind of impactful things about the organization. So rather than spending 3 months digesting a company-wide engagement survey and then trying to mobilize people around how are we going to improve team effectiveness, I feel like we're now going to have time and headspace to be more intentional about it. And so where I'm going with this is I think ONA is like a perfect candidate for a thing that the modern people leader will be focused on. Because if I think about my organization, like what are, as a CEO, as a former CEO, like what do I want to know? I want to know who my top performers are. But not only that, like top performance is great, but how are they actually contributing to our end goal, the mission of the company? And tools like, I believe, like, and I promise I'll get to my question. Tools like this help enable things that were it was like black box. Like we don't actually know how the work is getting done and who is contributing to that at scale. And I feel like that is a use case that is perfect for ONA because of the concept itself and having better technology. And so, when you think about the future, like how does that resonate with you? And like for the HR leaders out there or the VPs of people that are really trying to find the next way they can really have a positive impact to the org, what would be your business case for ONA being part of those areas of focus?
The best HR leaders that we've had on the show don't just talk about AI, they're actually using it like right now in real practical ways. And so that's why when ChartHop shared that they're bringing back 2-minute talks and this time it's all about AI, I got pretty excited. And so on June 4th, they're having their first 2-minute talk in a while, and it's going to be a handful of HR leaders. Each HR leader is going to get 120 seconds to talk, and they're only allowed to bring one slide each. So no theories, no fluff, just real stories of how they're using AI in their day-to-day work. If this sounds like your jam and you want to attend, I'm going to drop the link to sign up in the show notes. And honestly, I'm probably going to go sign up myself right now. So yeah, go check it out.
Great question. I think that so much of the focus and trying to figure out AI right now is around efficiency. Like, how do we do things more efficiently? And I think ONA is that next step to effectiveness. So moving from efficient to effective. And also thinking about doing more with fewer resources, with AI in your toolkit, ONA in your toolkit. This allows you to be far more targeted than you ever would be able to. This gives you those insights to do that and replicate it. One thing, just thinking about like this topic of network science, just to kind of back that up a little bit more too, there are public health applications of this. So if you think about like, let's say like you've only got enough vaccines for 20% of your population, and you have this like out of control, crazy situation that needs to be controlled. How do you figure out of your community which 20% gets the vaccine to actually affect the greatest population? And so the org network analysis can not only identify that 20%, it can also identify something. The term, I'm going to use a technical term. There are other terms to use, but I'll use a technical term as eigenvector centrality, which is about influence. So it's not just like who's the most connected, it's whose connections have the greatest influence in the community.
That's what I was referring. That to me is unlocking real power.
So that 20% is who you give the vaccines to. That eigenvector centrality group is who you would tell to change behaviors and share how to change behaviors and share like what the actual like communicate. That's who you would communicate through.
Yeah. It almost reminds me of Malcolm Gladwell's most recent book. And I think he talks about this, how it was really just like the 20% of people that seemed to be more contagious because of like how many air particles they put out. Like they were the super spreaders, like the 20% of people. And so I was just thinking about that book, and there's a lot of examples from that book. But I'm going to keep
not to dip into like a space that is a little controversial right now, but it's like it's a real application, and I think the visualization on it too is pretty powerful.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so let's say I'm a people leader and I want to try this out. Like, what's the step-by-step process, and how technical does it get?
It can get real technical, and there are two different ways of data capture. You can do like an explicit data capture with a survey, or you can do a metadata capture, which is more like crawling different systems and scraping data from already out there data that you have. There are privacy concerns, of course, with the latter, that you'd want to be really clear around some of the parameters of what you're collecting and how you're using it. For the former, that's like more of a 101 approach that can still be super powerful. So I would start with what business questions you actually are trying to solve. Like, what kind of hypotheses do you have about the network that you're working within? And then center the questions on that. So some of the questions that are commonly asked, and they're simple questions, and you'd ask them of your entire workforce. Who do you go to for help or advice? Who motivates you? And based on the responses to those two very simple questions, you can come up...
Sorry, it's just those two questions?
You could just use those two questions. You could just use one of them. You could also ask a question of like, who do you depend on the most to get your work done? There are other ways of... Again, it depends on what you're trying to solve for. But those two questions get at, for me, like, who are your culture carriers? Like, who is emulating the behaviors you want your leaders to have? Who are those folks who are information or knowledge hubs that are sharing and giving updates or advice, like real technical knowledge too? And the motivation one is another interesting one, because it's, again, like more of that cultural kind of norm that you might want to have, like who's really picking you up and helping you do great work and like elevating the quality of the work too.
Like the future leaders, basically.
Yeah, totally. So two very simple questions. And you could embed this in its own survey, just have a standalone, or embed it in your performance review process, whatever that might look like.
So I want to come back to that and dig into the 101 approach, but just for funsies, like what does the more advanced route look like, where you're scraping the metadata and coming up with your ONA?
Metadata could look like Slack interactions, meetings, Zooms, emails. It's just a much bigger set of data. It doesn't necessarily mean the data is better quality. So in some ways, the 101 approach is better quality because it allows people to actually answer for themselves. You could validate it with maybe the metadata. I will asterisk all of this with any kind of data collection that there are caveats to this. So you ask who I go to for help or advice, I'm probably only going to think about the last couple of weeks, right? Probably not going to think about that project 6 weeks ago that somebody was super helpful on or was really motivational around. So it needs to take that into account.
And so coming back to this,
one more thing that I'll just mention.
Yeah, go for it.
Because I mentioned information flow as being something or a dependency on someone. A next level to that would be actually qualifying that with a 1 to 5 scale. So I don't just go to this person, but I go to them with this level of frequency.
So what I love about this is, first, even if we go the more sophisticated or more involved, I won't say sophisticated, this is all data that most companies have access to. Let's be honest, most companies have access to the Slack interactions, the Teams interactions, probably more than that. So the fact that you can tap into that data and do a validation of sorts, I think just makes this kind of analysis even better for me, because as CEO, I'm just remembering leadership team conversations when there's always someone who's well, this is a limited data set if we're working off the 2-question survey or polling. And so I think it's good to have that option to kind of further validate. But getting back to the approach in the most simplistic way, that's super realistic. And I feel like these are questions that are easy for people to answer, right? There's not a lot of bias in it's pretty black and white. Who are you working with? Who do you depend on the most? Those are, I feel like these are questions that you're going to have high quality of data. And so when we complete the analysis, we get the data back. So can you tell us a little bit about the processing and the output of this? What is that kind of segment of the execution playbook look like?
Yep. I mentioned the eigenvector centrality before. I'll call them network influencers. That's probably a much easier term. That's basically what they are. So you could have as your output a lot of different insights, but I'll start with some basic ones. You could have the network influencer being one of them. So identifying within a defined network who are the key influencers. So you could have that for your entire organization, or you could have it at the department level. You would just need to, within the algorithm, have different constraints around that. You could also have what we called force multipliers, which are also the technical term would be central node. So those are the most connected individuals. And I used force multipliers because we saw those as the culture carriers of really elevating. Yes, it was sheer volume of connections, but again, the quality of the data, the types of behaviors we want to see, we consider that to be a force multiplier. You could also look at people that are considered brokers. So brokers are those people who are connecting otherwise disconnected people. So they're the bridges. Without them, it may mean that two departments are not communicating with one another. So you start to see these patterns in the network analysis with just those three, the network influencer, the central nodes, and the brokers. And you can start to, especially through a visualization, identify where main collaboration hubs are happening. And you can also identify islands. Who's out truly on an island where they're not getting motivated or getting help or advice from anyone. Nobody's going to them, rather. And through that visualization, you can also add a couple different filters. You can look at, your individual contributors versus your managers. You could look at it by location. You could look at it by level. You could filter for performance rating. You could look at tenure. So what's the relationship between tenure and your force multiplier score? So like just by nature of being here longer, does that mean you are more likely to say be a network influencer or be somebody who's considered a broker?
And so I would imagine that this output, depending on like which of these the results that you're particularly interested in would be summarized, reports are generated, and then it's presented at a leadership team meeting. And so then what? Like what are some of the most useful ways that leaders and managers can actually use the data? Because a lot of times what I've seen with more sophisticated kind of performance management, talent management type of tools, it's almost like you need a consultant to interpret the results and then coach people on what to do with it. And that's where sometimes these sorts of tools can fall down. And so how have you seen leaders and managers be successful? And what do you think, was the driver for that?
I'll share two examples. The first is, I think, incredibly practical, which is give managers this information. I was totally validated in this effort when a new VP told me that this was a single most valuable piece of information to get to know his team and help him ramp up to being effective as a people leader and understanding how his organization worked. And by that, I mean, we actually embedded into one of our systems for a manager view when you're looking at your team member's profile. Who do they go to for help or advice? Who do they say motivates them? And then on the flip side, who comes to them for help or advice or who motivates them? And it's also helpful for a manager if you have somebody who is leaving, check their network. What kind of impact might that have? Like if they are key between your team and another team that you very rarely work with, but they are a broker in that relationship as part of the network, who's going to play that role when they leave?
Is there like so I'm thinking about some of the companies I've worked for, and I've never really worked for a huge company. The biggest company I worked for is probably like 2,000 employees. And it felt like there was always ONA that was happening, but like in an informal way. Like, like at every company, the leaders will spot the heads that are popping up and make the determination that that person is an influencer or a broker or a force multiplier. And because of that, they give them more opportunities. Where I feel like that can kind of go the wrong way is when they're picking the wrong people. Like that determination is not backed by data. And that's why I really like this ONA approach. And so another thing that came to mind is it feels like a lot of times the brokers, the influencers, or I'm forgetting the three different names, but they tend to be the same people. Is that something that you also see in the data?
Not the network influencers and the force multipliers or central nodes. There's overlap there for sure. But there are also people that don't show up like on any other list that actually are influencers. And it's because the few connections they have are deeply connected and influential. So the quality of their connections actually looks different than the most connected people. So you might have 50 connections, but compared to somebody else who has 5 really all-star A-team connections, like that person actually might prove to be more of the influencer. Yeah.
I also think about we've been talking a lot about this metric recently, employee lifetime value to CAC. And I feel like there has to be a way that you can like assign some sort of like dollar value to these employees that are one of these 3 profiles. Is that something that that y'all tried or thought about?
I think that's super interesting. Something definitely to explore. Yeah. And I think I was just thinking, it's like it's a little bit like what's the risk score of somebody leaving too? It's like attrition risk. I feel like there's probably like a triangulation of these data points to create an actual financial value around.
For sure. For sure. And here's why I think this is so relevant today, and kind of going back to my point earlier on Gen AI. So I think we've all read a post in LinkedIn around the Spotify CEO. Like, hey, we're not going to hire a single person without asking how AI could be used, or if AI could do this job. And whether you agree with that or not, like, I know there are a lot of personal feelings, but for me, it's like, is this really news, or is this just common sense at this point? Because Gen AI is a tremendous superpower. I'm not going to go on a rant about that, because Daniel and I have talked about it at length. And if you don't realize that, you need to go in there and start using it. Not you, Abby, but you, our listeners. And here's what I think: we're a quarter or two away from that question being asked internally. So, like, that question is being asked for net new candidates and employees. But I think we're not far. If we're not, we may already be there, honestly. And it's super hard if you look at traditional performance. If you try to think about, okay, well, if we apply this Gen AI analysis, like, what job could be done with AI? Like, how do you determine that? And how do you determine which talent you keep and which talent you let go? And because it's more nuanced than just the job itself, because talent, I mean, these are human beings that have a lot of different skills and that are delivering real commercial effectiveness to their organizations. And so, what are you going to look at? Are you going to look at your performance, your data ratings? That's not going to tell you that. That's like popularity contests and like everyone trying to get, their employees the best pay. And so something like ONA starts to tell me a totally different story about my talent. And I don't know if that resonates with you guys at all. I know we don't have a lot of time because, Daniel, I think we have to get you out of here pretty soon. But that like, this whole time I've been thinking about it, it popped in my head, in the early part of this conversation. And I'm like, oh man, like I hope this kind of prediction isn't true that I'm walking you guys through, but it's hard to not think that it's going to happen. And when we get to that point, I just fear a lot of executives and leaders are going to make, hasty decisions, and they're going to make wrong decisions. And so this feels like maybe a way that we can make, there can be a better way.
Yeah, and I think I agree totally. This is, I think, really practical, useful information to have. I also don't think it stands on its own. Like, it's additional context, and it needs the help of interpretation to, like, kind of ask some deeper questions too. And it doesn't necessarily mean like you're not going to get rid of folks that if you like, you need to cut costs, you need to cut costs or restructure, but you may approach it differently. You may really think about, like, what does transition look like? Like, what does succession planning need to look like?
I feel like we could keep talking about this for another 10, 15 minutes, or probably like 30, 40, 50. But
and Abby, just so you know, and I think our guests know because we've talked about this on the show, but Daniel and I have our own internal outline that helps us facilitate these conversations asynchronously. And I literally wrote, I can see why I wanted her on so bad I could talk to her all day, i.e. you. So this has been awesome. I'm glad we made this happen. But to
Thank
Daniel's
you.
point,
Likewise.
we could talk for hours about
Totally.
this stuff with you.
And with that said, last part of the show, rapid fire questions, which you're familiar with. And so question one, what's one piece of advice that you'd give to someone starting in HR today?
Get to know the business, like really know the business and understand how your company actually makes money.
Next question. If the people you've worked with over the years gave you a superpower nickname, what would it be?
So I knew this question was coming, so I fielded it to some of my past team members, and they had a lot of fun with it. They said,
First of all, I love that guests do that. I love that you actually go ask your team what it would be.
Well, I gotta say,
and
like,
have fun.
Yeah, it's very like humbling and sweet to hear. Great team building exercise, by the way, to like have teams think about this for each other. They said, Empress of empathy. You understand the team and know how to motivate them.
I like that one.
Let's go. You had me at Empress.
Yeah. All right. Question 3. If you could steal one strategy from another company, what would it be?
This might be cheating, but because I no longer work at Carta, I want one of the Carta strategies wherever I go next, especially as a candidate right now, which is first and best. First and best is an approach. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the idea is that when Carta is making an offer to a candidate, it is the first and best offer that they will make. So there's no negotiating. And the idea behind that is that with sincerity, Carta is making the best offer that they can give to the candidate. That's the highest comp that they're willing to pay. And it just helps, I think, create a sense of fairness and trust between the employee and the employer right off the bat. Like, we're not hiding anything or keeping anything back. It's just all out there.
Sounds like Carta has their job architecture on lock, as they should be.
You really need to know. Yeah, you really need to know comp in the market to do that. Yeah, for sure.
And so that gets us to our last rapid fire question. If you could nominate someone for us to spotlight, like next gen modern people leader, like who should we have on the show next? Who would you nominate?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. One, you've already had so many good people, so many. So I went a little out of the box and thinking about people ops as a product and what's needed to actually hone that product mindset going forward. And I can't help but think about design. And so I have somebody I know through actually my sister. Her name is Melanie Kale. She is a strategist. She is a storyteller. She is an experienced designer. And she just embeds herself in leadership teams to help make change happen and shape change. And part of her core belief is around showing that how we design is just as transformative as what we design. So she's fun. She's super smart and she gets it, like the design, the product, the program, the people, like all of it and how it connects.
That's right up our alley. We would definitely want to have her on. All right. So one word or phrase close. So we all respond with a word or phrase from the episode that we want to wrap up with. It could be anything. Anybody?
I'm going last for a reason.
I could say, I almost stole what I know Steven's going to say, but I decided not to. I'm going to say ONA, just because that's the cop-out answer.
Damn it, and you're kind of stealing mine anyway. I'm going to go, I don't actually know what I'm saying, but I'm going to go with eigenvector, because I think that's what you said.
Yes.
I've been Googling it. I've been Googling it here because Daniel wrote Ivan Tractor in our notes, but eigenvector is my one word close.
Eigenvector, good. I'll go with Kevin Bacon.
Yes,
ooh, that's a good one.
Oh my God. Well, Abby, thank you so much for sitting across from me at our MPL Live dinner. And for the people leaders that are listening, like when we reach out to you and invite you to these dinners, like for real, come join us. Cause like, I feel like this is how magic like this happens. And it's been an absolute joy, Abby. And for the companies out there, like we got some great talent here, just like waiting to get picked up. So, so hopefully this will generate some introductions for you, Abby.
Thank you.
Keep in touch, and you're now part of the MPL fam. So I hope you'll come back and join us again sometime.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you much.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye, y'all.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Modern People Leader. We really, really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating. It would mean the world to us. And connect with us on LinkedIn. We want to know what you think about the show, and you can find links to both of our profiles in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and see you on the next episode.